Okay, thanks, Katie, for catching that. Just bear with me. I get into, there we go. Okay, so today the topic is managing burnout. We don't have all of the answers. However, we are hoping to just shed a little bit of light on the topic. I am Amy Nickerson, the host, and we also have Katie Lawson with us, who is sort of a co-host, but she's actually the one that we'll be hearing from at length regarding her experience with making a career change. Before we get started, I just want to introduce myself a little bit and my career coaching business. So this is my advertisement. My career has spanned all three areas of practice: community and public health, as well as clinical and food service management. This all came together in my role as the program director for a coordinated graduate program at the University of Vermont. For 14 years, I developed and expanded the graduate program. I recruited, interviewed, and selected candidates. I also provided advising, career counseling or guidance, and mentoring for all stages of professional development. My position also included teaching 2 to 3 courses each semester. Since I really enjoy helping, whether it's a soon-to-be, an emerging, or a mid-career professional on their path, I launched this career coaching practice late in 2022. So that's kind of my background. What can I do to help career changers? And although we kind of targeted this webinar towards people who might be considering a career change as their solution to the burnout, I am in the practice of helping many different practitioners on their journey. So what I do is I help clients set goals, identify what it is they want to do, where they want to get to, and help them develop strategies to get there. I can also help with resume preparation, interview skills, public speaking, boosting confidence, things we all take for granted, but they are barriers in some cases. Help you make connections, and then looking forward to establish a professional community with career networking groups. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Katie.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Super excited to have you all here and talk about a topic that's very, I think, prevalent for all of us, right? Especially as we come out of the pandemic. We're a little bit more aware of some of these feelings. A little bit about my background. I'm a registered dietitian and have been since 2012. I currently work for Nestle USA. I manage their regulatory and scientific affairs program based here in Arlington. In my free time, I am a heavy volunteer of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is the professional organization that represents dietitians and NDTRs, or dietetic technicians registered. And then also in my free time, I like to go visit places. My favorite state of Vermont, which is that top picture, that's the place called Shelburne Farms. Highly recommend, if you ever get to Vermont, to go visit that place. It is a seasonal place. You can walk the property year round, but it's fantastic. And then I have a geriatric dog, as I was just informed when I took him for his wellness visit, named Kurt, who enjoys nothing more than going to the park. And similar to Amy, have a very deep passion for mentoring and developing. I currently have a team of 10 professionals that I lead today, and have just continued to blossom in that space of coaching and development. So a little bit about me, and I'll share a little bit more as we get into the interview a little bit later. Back to you, Amy.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Before we go any further, we are curious to know who is in the audience, and if you'd be willing to share a little something about you in the chat box. Katie will be monitoring the chat box as we go on. So you could either describe the nature of your work or at the very least the sector that you work in. So go ahead and just enter that into the chat box and we'll get a sense of who's here with us today. So the goal of today is really to get a sense for each one of you. Is a career change the next step for you? We'll discover that it's not necessarily always the answer to burnout. I think I'm hearing some voices in the background. Could you mute if you're not muted, please? That would be great. So burnout is a really hot topic right now. It seems as though every week there's a new podcast or social media post. And I noticed that at FENCI, the annual meeting of registered dietitians and nutrition professionals next month in Denver, that there is a session on burnout. So I think that speaks to the timeliness of the topic, to echo a little bit what Katie was just saying. So as far as what we hope you will get out of it, out of participating in the webinar, we will be talking about the connection between burnout and alternate career choices. We'll be taking a look at 5 key steps for successful career change. We'll also ask you to identify 3 transferable professional skills, and then ask you to make a commitment, before we sign off today, to make an agreement with yourself what might be next. To establish some common ground, I thought it might be useful to define burnout. This is from the World Health Organization in 2019. And what we've learned about burnout is that it does result from chronic workplace stress. And there are sort of 3 dimensions of it. There's this feeling of exhaustion or energy depletion, fatigue. There's also a sense of detachment from the workplace, whether that comes from negativism or cynicism related to a job. And all of that amounts to reduced professional efficacy. So again, in the chat box, if you're feeling burned out, let us know. Simple yes or no, or you're not sure. Maybe you'll have a better sense at the end of this webinar. So no matter who you read, no matter what your source of information is, there are 6 leading causes of burnout. There is the workload imbalance, there's perceived lack of control, where people feel like they don't have any sense of control over their schedule or the amount of work output that's expected of them. There's a lack of recognition for the work that you do. For some people, that doesn't matter if you're intrinsically motivated. It doesn't matter if the leadership doesn't acknowledge what you're doing. However, regardless of whether you're intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated, I think it's nice to know that people are appreciating the work that you do. Another cause of burnout is the absence of any psychological safety. And this is becoming, again, it's another, I wouldn't call it a hot topic, but companies are becoming more aware of the importance of creating a sense of psychological safety. This next one is a very hot button item for dietitians. In fact, I've been engaged in a LinkedIn conversation for the last several days about how low the compensation is for dietitians, and how do we move forward out of that place. And then for some people, the value system of a company may diverge from what originally they hired into. But I think it's important to look closely that these leading causes of burnout, or burnout in general, it's an organizational or systems phenomenon, and it plays out in you, the individual employee. And it's interesting to see how many companies are you know, they're providing a lot of wellness support and mental health support, but they're not changing the conditions that are contributing to burnout. And so that's why we all have to figure out a way to manage it. So I wonder how many of you see your experience in that list. I certainly have experienced it in my professional world. All right, so let's think about who we are. And we have a word cloud fun activity. And if you're in your browser, you would log into menti.com and enter this code. We'd like you to describe 3 words that you would use to describe, or we'd like you to enter 3 words that you would use to describe yourself. So just go ahead and you can enter 3 words, and let's see that screen light up. Provided the technology works. Katie, could you try entering a word to see if that link is working?
Working, Amy. I'm thinking of my words.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Coming. Yep.
There's no right or wrong answers. It's just, what words would you use to describe yourself, whether it's professionally, personally? So we must have a number of people putting in creative, passionate, dedicated, stressed. Okay, I think we can all relate to that. We'll give another 30 seconds or so. A lot of these terms describe the traits that you see in dietitians. So it's kind of reassuring to see that what we think are the traits are actually playing out. So I'm seeing fatigued, hardworking, stretched thin. There are some burnout terms in the response. Thank you for contributing to that. Let's see if I can move on. Okay, so how did we get here today? Well, first of all, I would say a few months ago, I started seeing an incredibly high number of social media posts, whether it was on LinkedIn, different Facebook groups that are dedicated to registered dietitians and nutrition professionals about burnout, and people just feeling like they really wanted to change their profession, their career, because they were so burned out. It inspired me to write a blog in June. You can check out my website to read through that. So there's been a lot of energy put into people being burned out. The sense of burnout really intensified after the pandemic, especially in the healthcare sector. And I have to say that sometimes I feel like this is my own case study, because I experienced burnout in my work at the university, where it was a program with one person directing and teaching in a graduate program. And we were one person, and I referred to the team of 3. It was me, myself, and I. And me, myself, and I got pretty worn out from that work, but I had no options. So that's why in parentheses I put, I was burned out, but I had no options. And I would have to say that the burnout intensified towards the latter part of my work in that role. Then we have other examples of burnout, or Katie. We tried to determine if she had been burned out or was she simply looking for a new career trajectory. And we'll be talking more with her about that. So one of the takeaways from today, I think, will be that career change is not always about burnout, but that is how we started on this journey. Okay, now I need to stop sharing my screen so that Katie can join me. Oops, wait a minute. Okay, so now we're having a conversation with Katie. Let me stop sharing my screen. I have to just, technology is, oops. Bear with me here. I need to stop sharing. Oh, I have stopped sharing, right? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So Katie, it's just you and me now,
Perfect.
right? Okay.
Yep.
So let me get back into, can you fix the screen for us?
Yep. It's you and I. We're pinned.
Okay. So what we thought we'd do is just have kind of a back and forth, like an interview, to kind of get at some of the reasons behind Katie's experience of making a career change, because she had a rather major pivot earlier in her career. So Katie, I wonder if you can start by telling us what was the reason for making the switch from, oh, and I should have said, Katie at the time was in a university setting, doing both clinical work and food service management work. And so, Katie, what was the reason for making the switch from that work at the university to regulatory affairs?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And I always joke, because when we talk about this, I think at first you said, no, you were just looking to switch careers. You had always wanted to live in DC, and the opportunity came. But the more I unpacked that myself, it definitely was driven unknowingly at the time by burnout and what I was experiencing. I loved my jobs in clinical nutrition. I worked long-term care when I first started out after graduating. I was the only dietitian in a 140 bed hospital. And I loved my role in university school food service. Um, but what I quickly found was myself always thinking, is this just the grind of being fresh into the workforce, or is there something extraordinary here that is making me lose the passion and the purpose that I feel tied to being a dietitian? I went into the practice knowing that I wanted to help people. And for the first few years, kept that flame burning. But more and more, I would find myself coming home and saying, I don't want to go back to work tomorrow. And so that's when I started thinking about, well, what would I do? And had the opportunity. I was living in Vermont at the time, and this role came open at Keurig Green Mountain for a nutrition specialist. And they particularly wanted an RD. And I thought, how cool for a dietitian to work for a food company. That wasn't really something that I was taught in my undergraduate and graduate career, and just said to everyone in the state of Vermont who was a dietitian, you need to apply for this job. Someone has to do it. I'm moving to DC. I'd always wanted to live in DC. And the more and more I talked to my network and came to, they said, no, this is actually really probably something that would be right up your alley. My dad and I always had a very special bond as it related to business and business acumen. And I thought, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll just apply and see what happens. So as I was thinking about my career transition, it wasn't that I necessarily at first was so focused on it, but it was coming from this result of, I knew I needed to make a change, and it happened to be the first job sector that was available to me in the state of Vermont that really started to reignite my passion, and help me kind of find that new trajectory into regulatory.
Okay, thank you. And I would just share with the group that Katie actually encouraged me to apply for the job. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think you need to apply for that job. So look where it took her. So I'm sure you must have had a lot of scary moments, Katie. Tell us about your biggest concerns during that transition, and how did you manage those concerns or overcome them? And what were some of your fears about making this total shift in your career?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, right away, the biggest kind of pause that I had was, am I really qualified? That imposter syndrome hit hard for me. I knew I probably could figure it out. Both of my previous roles in clinical and in university school food service were first of their kinds for that facility and the type of work that I was doing. Um, and I had figured it out before, felt pretty confident in that, but this was completely brand new. I had only taken a 6-week study abroad experience. I went to Michigan State and had a wonderful time perusing around Italy and Switzerland, but I didn't really pay that much attention. I was distracted by the mountains, by the food of international food laws. So I thought, okay, you know a little bit about it, but this isn't really your strong suit. It wasn't something that I was taught as an undergrad. And so that imposter syndrome was really the first hurdle that I had to think about. The second one was shifting industries, right? So moving from a clinical or food service background, which were experiences that I had in my dietetic internship and my undergrad experience, but then really making that true switch to a corporate environment was brand new to me. And even though I really appreciated the business side of things, I had never really put pen to paper in that. So I had to think about, okay, I'm in a new industry, a new part of dietetics, into a new company and into a new role, and what else might I be able to do. The other hurdle that I had was they asked me to interview 5 times before they extended the offer, which really played with my mental belief in, do I have the right skill set? Can they see me doing the job? And so I had to, yeah, thanks, Melissa. I had to really get over that part too of, okay, is it really worth my time to chase down this new opportunity if there's just going to keep bringing me back and back and back? At some point, I even said to my boss at the time, I said, this is my 5th time coming to interview politely. I have no more PTO days, so I need you to either make a decision now or shortly in the next few days to tell me if I'm the candidate for you or not. He offered me the job on the spot, but it was just really hard for me to keep coming back every single time. So for imposter syndrome, advocating for myself, and then once I got into the role, my boss went on holiday for 6 weeks and was like, I am unreachable. It was week 3 and handed me a binder that said, if the FDA comes to inspect our facility, here's everything you need to know in this binder. And I just almost, was beside myself. I kept that binder in my book bag day in and day night. I studied it to no end, just in case the FDA showed up. Thankfully, they did not. But it was really challenging the first few weeks.
So it sounds like you had to really continue to believe in yourself throughout each of those 5 interview steps, which I think would be unnerving. Yeah.
I credit my mom to that. She is always one to say, you never give up. That's my motto now in life. And I'm thankful she said that, because I am, extremely pleased. Regulatory is my passion, and have fallen in love with that side of the profession. But yeah, I almost was a quick stint and then I almost got out. So.
Okay, so the next question is, your experience makes me think about how important it is for nutrition professionals to recognize their transferable skills. And what made you think you had the skill set that corporate was looking for? Because the switch from clinical and university work to the corporate for-profit world is a huge leap. And so what made you think you had the skill set? And then also, what was the skill set that they were looking for in you? Like, why did they hire you given your lack of experience?
Yeah, I like to think it's because I'm from the Midwest and my Midwestern charm was the only thing that they were interested in. But quickly after I got started and settled, and really started to take a look, a lot of the things that I had been doing, I said, okay, I work here now. I worked at a company before. So at the very least, I at least have had a job. I know what to do. But I think this rings true even today when I'm looking for new people to join my team. Dietitians, have such a unique background that you can really take those experiences and apply them in a wide variety of settings. And so as I was going through and understanding, okay, I've got business acumen from knowledge level. Now I need to go apply that. I'm a strong communicator. I've always been a harmonizer in terms of trying to find a consensus or a win-win. And when you work in regulatory, I've learned that over time, you're really helping to manage risk first and foremost. So how do you balance the desires of marketing with the capabilities of your product development team, and then ultimately what the consumer wants to see? And so I thought, okay, these are some of my strong skills: communication, getting together with people, trying to find a solution to the problem, and applied that. And I look at that today. The past 5 people who have joined my team didn't have a direct regulatory experience, but it's people who can sit there and think about, how do I think critically about a solution, are eager to solve problems, that have been the most successful in a regulatory role. And I think that can translate to any part of the profession, whether you're moving from one part of clinical to another, dialysis maybe to critical care, or from clinical to food service to community, and beyond. There's just a lot of ways you can take your current skill set and apply that. You just might have to think a little bit creatively. Recently, someone told me, well, you have no factory experience. How are you ready for this job? And I sat there and I said, what? What do you mean I have to have factory experience? And when I quickly on a dime, I said, I don't have direct factory experience, but I've worked in a number of kitchens, and I can promise you I can make meals for 100 people. So if I can make meals for 100 people, probably can figure out how to make 10,000 meals coming off of this factory line. And so you start to kind of see how you can turn your experiences and your knowledge and skills into the right path to get you there, even if you've never done it before.
So it sounds like it's a matter of, to a certain extent, a matter of the spin that you put on your skill set. And so I think you mentioned some really universal traits that dietitians and nutrition professionals have, especially with regard to communication. You also mentioned a couple of other words that struck me. One is your experience working on a team. I know in the university setting you were part of a team, and I think that's an important skill, being able to work on a team. And you said from your standpoint, you're a consensus builder, but there's also just the ability to work on a team, to be willing to have that give and take. It's not always about your agenda, trying to think about other people's agendas. And then a really, I think, prominent skill that dietitians sometimes overlook is the critical thinking piece. And it's hard to put any price tag on that, the value of that. However, your ability to think critically, and if you've been in clinical, you know that you have to go through a stepwise process in deciding what a nutrition care plan would look like. If it's food service, as Katie just mentioned, if you can do 10 meals, 100 meals, you can do 10,000 meals. So be thinking about the different skills that you have that maybe haven't put a name to yet. Okay, so next question is, it sounds like you had to market yourself a little bit to Keurig. For someone looking to make a career change, what are the top two to three things that you would do differently the next time around when making a career change? And I know that regulatory is your passion, but let's say that something changes in another 10 years. What are 2 to 3 things that you would do differently?
Yeah, well, my ultimate passion is becoming a president or VP. So that's, I think, my next target. But the answer still remains the same, of whether you are looking to just find a new job within your current organization, or in a new one, or altogether moving out of dietetics or into dietetics. I think taking that time to really take an inventory of all of your past accomplishments. It's really easy to not want to highlight that. But when you are looking for that change, and I've been on both sides of the table now as an interviewer and an interviewee, the thing that sticks out to me the most is the people who can say, here's my experience and here's how I see it being applicable to your role. So even if they've never done regulatory or have never worked in food service, making that strong connection also demonstrates your passion for it. So I would make sure that I highlight the experience that you have, but also the willingness to learn. I think being really understanding of where you are, knowing yourself, knowing that you may not have all the answers, but being able to go find those or how you might think through a problem real time in an interview says a lot about your character and what you're willing to bring to the table. And especially when it comes to burnout, being firm in what you stand for and where those boundaries are for you personally makes trying to find that balance. I don't like to say work-life balance. I think it's just life balance now, because the pandemic has fundamentally shifted how work intertwines into our lives. But if you know your strong boundaries, it really helps you put that perspective in place when you're starting a new endeavor. And so for me, one of the biggest lessons I learned when making a switch from school food service to regulatory was I cut out exercising. And I needed to find a way to get back to myself to exercise, because when I can exercise, I can show up better for myself. I can show up better for the team around me. And that's true to this day. My calendar's blocked from 7 to 8:30 in the morning for two reasons. One, it's time to exercise if I don't have time in the evening to do it, but it's also my creative thinking time. I'm a morning person through and through. So I try to find ways that within my calendar, I can block those times. And it was really difficult to do, especially if you're in a role or you're a boss or a mentor where you feel like you have to constantly be available and on for people, to put that priority into yourself and to make that time in your day to do it. But you get there in baby steps. It's not a consistent change. I literally had to start with 1 day a week blocking my calendar for that time frame before it became an ingrained behavior into my current day.
Okay, I just was skimming through the chat box. There's been
I
a
know
couple
there's
of
great questions.
comments and questions that we will get to. I have one more question for you, Katie. Well, actually, there was a follow-up to one of them. You mentioned that in the interview process that it's important to demonstrate your willingness to learn. And so I'm taking, the question had been the top 2 to 3 things that you would do differently the next time. So did you, twofold question, do you feel like you didn't demonstrate a willingness to learn? And the flip side is, how do you suggest that candidates indicate their willingness to learn in an interview without somebody just saying, you know, I know that behavioral interview questions are quite common now. And so you're given a scenario and that can sometimes get at the issue of your willingness to learn.
Yeah, I think my younger self, I was definitely like, it had to be buttoned up. So I had an answer for everything within a second. And I can see you laughing because you know me very well. Nowadays, it's recognizing that that willingness to learn is inherent, but sometimes you don't have that answer right away. So taking that pause, and I call it out as it is now. I say, hey, I've never had that experience, but if I had to put myself in that situation right now, and make a decision as a leader, here's what I would think about first. Here's the stakeholders I would reach out to. So you can show them, whoever it may be, whether it's your current boss or a new one, that you have that ability to go find the answer in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, yeah, great response. So the last question, looking back, what were some of your most meaningful and unexpected surprises on your journey of making this career transition?
My favorite question. I think it was getting into people leadership or mentoring and coaching and being responsible to help guide someone else. Really forced me to evaluate how I show up in times of stress and in times of burnout. and how that then the impact or picture it gives other people. And now as a leader, I have an immense responsibility to help shape and guide the day, the week, the month that my team has. And it's been a real aha moment for me to say, okay, when you're feeling burned out, and there's always going to be things that get you stressed day to day, but it's that continual grind that just really gives you no hope or no passion. Where can you dig deep and find that reevaluation? And whether it's a career change or helping to find others, like my purpose now that I've experienced burned out a couple of times in my career is making sure to the best of my ability that my team doesn't. So how can I help them, whether it's taking projects off their to-do list, reminding them to take their PTO, all of those good things, that we're fostering a culture of removing burnout from the conversation together. And with me primarily leading that path, because I don't want it to just be another thing that the team has to deal with. So we really instill that into our culture today of how do we help each other, because it's always going to be one thing after the next, especially in the regulatory world. It can burn out. It can come hot and heavy. But we really strive to keep that top of mind. And when someone is burned out, it's really cool to see that person step back and the team step up to kind of help alleviate some of that for the time being.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that it's really easy to experience burnout in the regulatory world. And I would say that it's really easy to experience burnout in the academic world.
Oh, of course, any
and
environment.
in any environment, yeah. And so I think something that you said starts to get at the root of the problem, which is, it's a workplace, it's the environment that needs to change. It's not that people just need to fix themselves. However, we all do need to take those steps to set boundaries, for example. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Okay, after hearing Katie's story, I want you to think for just a minute, and we have another opportunity to fill in words in a word cloud. And so what I'd like you to think about is, now that you've heard about Katie's transferable skills, what are at least 3 transferable skills that you have developed in your nutrition and dietetics career? And if we have folks who are not just in the nutrition and dietetics career, then by all means, whatever profession you're in, whatever sector you're in, transferable skills, I think, cut across all aspects of professional work. So log into menti.com again, and there's your code. Yeah, there's that critical analysis, the critical thinking again. Flexibility and agility. Sometimes I've referred to myself as Gumby over the years because of having to be so flexible, rolling with the moment. Yeah, communication is a big one. And public speaking. problem solving is another great one, and that's an easy to promote skill that you have no matter what sector that you go into. We'll give another 30 seconds here for others to add. Okay. Well, I think it's important to recognize and identify what your transferable skills are. Perhaps looking at this word cloud, you'll think of, oh, I hadn't really thought about that as one of the skills that I have developed over the years. Because these transferable skills are identifying transferable skills are the first step in changing your career path, if that is in fact what you decide to do as your response to burnout, is to start thinking about another direction to go in. So this is my curated list of strategies for changing your career path. And I think the self-assessment component is really, you have to start there, thinking about what is your passion, what are you good at. I was reading an article last week about, well, it's fine and good to identify your passions, but sometimes they're a little bit out of reach. So thinking instead about what is it that you're good at and what do you enjoy doing, and maybe put your passion position on the back burner. The second one is to do your research, see what's out there. What is a good fit for you? And then thinking back to your transferable skills, where's the fit? Where's the match between what you want to do, what's available, and what you can do well? The next is to develop an action plan. We all know about SMART goals. It's a great way to hold yourself accountable, but you have to develop a plan. And it's always just so interesting to me that unless I write something down and I have to look at it on a piece of paper, it's very easy to just keep pushing it aside, because in your brain, you just go to a different thought process. Another strategy is to really begin to network. The internet has made it so easy to network with people, whether it's LinkedIn or it's a Facebook group. There's so many different ways to connect with people. And also try a side hustle. Keep your current job, but try whatever it is that you want to do on the side if you have time permitting. I know that in and of itself can lead to burnout. If you're working in a full-time position and, oh, you want to try this side hustle, where's the time in the day that you can do all of that? But thinking about what a side hustle might look like can sometimes give you a feel for whether or not it's work that you want to do. It's kind of like needing to do an internship all over again when you have such a diverse array of experiences that are put in front of you, and now you just have to work a little bit harder to create those opportunities. And then check in with reality. If you have set some SMART goals, it's easy to determine, to assess your progress. Are you getting anywhere? What are your barriers? All the things that you do when you're trying to solve problems. Okay, and I asked Katie if she would share what her takeaway messages are for making a career change, or even thinking about it, because it's the thinking that has to happen before you actually make the career change.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. We had some similar ones, but I'll highlight just a few extra ones. If you're feeling burned out, or someone who's burned out and they're not quite sure where to start, sometimes finding ways to get similar experience or knowledge in your current role can help alleviate that, because it kind of gives you a light at the end of the tunnel. If you're taking those small steps to change, but you can still keep the coziness of your current role, right? But take on some new experiences and stretch you. And sometimes that may be all that you need to just kind of reinvigorate yourself, but also then it can ignite those passions. I highlighted this, don't underestimate your previous and current experiences, and finding ways to think about how those translate to your new role. The example I gave, right? Someone recently told me I have no factory experience, but I do have strong production experience. So you can find ways to make those connections. And I always tell people this, if you find something that just really ignites that spark in you, apply an interview. Even if you don't get the job, it's still going to teach you something. It's either going to help you confirm that, yep, you are qualified for that job and this just wasn't the right role, so it's redirecting you somewhere else. Or it highlights some areas of opportunity for you to go back and maybe think about, okay, is there a certificate course I can take? Is there something new that I can learn? And then last, but most importantly, try to find that time to build in you time, whatever that looks like, whether it's solitude time, giving your time to someone else. For me, it's taking the pup to the park, find that way to really take that you time in small increments throughout the day to help manage some of those feelings of being overwhelmed, burnt out, stressed out, can really go a long way. And know that you're not alone.
I guess I would just add too that it's a multi-step process. I think that's one of the biggest. I can speak from my own experience, having gone from my full-time work at the university to launching a career coaching business, and in this entrepreneurship world, is that it's so much slower than what you might anticipate it would be. So thanks, Katie, for sharing what your tips are. Okay, so in addition to what Katie shared, dare to step outside your comfort zone. You will have to take a risk. If you are risk averse, then you probably don't want to be thinking about making a career change. Build your network and use it. Stay connected. I recently wrote a blog on networking because people forget how to network, and some people are really intimidated by networking. But I think once you begin the conversation in a networking situation, you'll find that it goes very easily. It's kind of like teaching or doing public speaking. There's a little bit of anxiety until you open your mouth and you actually begin to talk, and then you can just kind of relax and breathe. And also believe in your capability. You've got this. And that's just the confidence factor. And I think Katie shared some great examples of how she did take a risk and she did believe that she was capable of doing the work. It took a little convincing. It sounds like they put her through the ringer with 5 interviews, but every step along the way, it seemed as though she convinced them that she was really capable of doing the work. So we hope that the conversation has provided some inspiration for all of you. Our kind of final step here is to, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. And also maybe Katie, you can be skimming through the chat box. But I think it's important to just pause for a minute and jot down, what is your next step? What would you do first? And if it helps you, jot that in the chat box. Tell us what you think is your next step. Maybe your next step is, oh, I'm not ready for a career change, or, oh, I think I need to do a little more exploration about how to manage the burnout that I'm experiencing. And that's a whole nother topic for a webinar or a discussion. And I think it goes beyond the confines of a blog. But put something in the chat box. Let us know what you are thinking as a result of having participated in today's webinar. You're not committed, we won't hold you to it, but I think it's just helpful to just pause. I'll give you a minute, and please feel free to share what would be your next step. And if you're not sure where to begin, I encourage you to reach out for a free discovery call with me. I can maybe help you sort through. It's a 20-minute call. You can find me on my webpage, www.simplehealthpartners.com. And on each page, there's a link to a discovery call. The other thing that we've decided to offer for people who really want to dive in and start taking some steps towards making a career change is we've decided to hold a masterclass in the fall. It'll be about a 3.5-hour session with a small amount of pre-work. And the purpose is to guide you through the process of taking the next step on your career journey. We're going to keep the group small so that we can provide both one-on-one guidance as well as having a group discussion. And there are more details that will be coming soon. We're still in the planning stage of it. But as a participant in today's webinar, you'll be given priority for a seat because, again, it is limited in numbers. So you will receive tomorrow through Eventbrite a post-webinar survey. We really appreciate getting your feedback. It helps for future planning. And then the CPE certificate for registered dietitians, registered dietitian nutritionists will be available for everyone who's joined us today. So with that, I would say thank you very much. And are there any questions?
Yeah, Amy, we've had a few.
Okay.
Let me pull the chat up again. Bear with me all. So the first question was a really interesting one. It talked about, do we see burnout in certain companies or certain area of practice? And curious your thoughts. I can provide some of mine after.
Okay, sure. So what I found interesting when I first went down this path of responding to in my brain all of the chatter about burnout is that from what I read, it was most pronounced in the clinical setting, that clinical practitioners were the ones who were most frequently feeling they were disappointed, they were burned out for all the reasons that we've talked about being burned out. So that's been my experience, is that it's mostly, from what I see on social media, it has been in the clinical setting. Now, when you don't rely on social media and you just read in the news or in journals, it's across all sectors. Do you want to add to that, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it spot on. It's interesting now working on a very corporate side of things. Burnout happens at all levels. And I think that has been one of my biggest takeaways, is that you used to think burnout was maybe just a leader thing or a manager thing, but it really is impacting everyone on all levels. And as I always tell people, you never know what people are dealing with when they go home or outside of the walls at work. And it's human first, right? That's how you show up. I've been very transparent with people on my team. I'm manager by day. At night, I'm dealing with my dad's estate. And so it's just those things that we just never know. And so it is prevalent everywhere. And just got to remind yourself of that and be kind to folks, because I think you'd be surprised of maybe not shows up outwardly to folks, but as soon as you say, hey, I'm feeling burnt out, probably 5 other people will be like, me too. So another question we got was thinking about, like, how do you kind of manage oscillating back and forth between wanting to find a new job? Maybe you go through several interview rounds, you don't get it, and so it just kind of brings this like wave of emotions or feelings tied to it too. And so just how might think about navigating that? You want to make a change, but it just doesn't seem to be sticking. Any ideas or tips for that, Amy?
That's a really difficult question to come up with a good answer. I think that if you didn't get the job, this is what I have said to my adult children. I have a 36-year-old son and a 34-year-old daughter. And of course, I've witnessed them going through job application processes, interviewing, not getting the job, trying again. And I try and look at it as if you didn't get the job, it wasn't the right job for you. I'm just such a believer in that. I know it's crushing to be rejected, to not be offered a position, but I really feel like you have to just come back up to the table and you have to believe that you have a lot to offer an entity, but this was just not the right fit. And of course, there is that oscillation back and forth. But if you truly are ready for a career change, that commitment to putting on your boots, pulling up your bootstraps, I guess is the expression, and trying again the next day, I think is the only thing you can do.
Yeah, that's solid advice. Another question we got, which is a fantastic one, any specific self-assessments out there that we would recommend folks start to look into as they begin their journey?
Yeah, that is a good question. And my first go-to is I do a SWOT analysis with myself. I just love the idea of the matrix. It forces you to look at some key components of what really is your priority, what are some opportunities, what is it that might get in the way, and what are your strengths? So for those who aren't familiar with the SWOT analysis acronym, it's your strengths, it's your weaknesses, it's your opportunities, and your threats. And just sitting with yourself, and you have to create time. What I've discovered in making my own entrepreneurial shift is that you have got to dedicate time every day to, this is when I'm going to work on my self-assessment. This is when I'm going to work on my business plan. This is when I'm going to work on the different aspects of the work that you want to get into. So I think that's one place to start. If you Google, there are other strategies out there for doing an assessment. And I know that clinical is an area that people are burned out on in many ways. But I find that just using that nutrition care process model, I know, Katie, I'm sorry I brought it up, but that whole process of assessing, giving it a name, a diagnosis, what are you going to do about it, an intervention, and then monitoring and an evaluation. I take that out of the clinical realm all the time. Do you want to add to that? We have 1 minute left.
No, I will see. Are there any last minute questions that anyone wants to come off mute and ask or in the chat?
Okay, well, remarkably that we're going to end on time and we didn't have to cut anything off. So thank you all very much for participating. And I hope we've provided some inspiration, and thank you, Katie. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.